I was the youngest volunteer. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying.
You lying little bitch. Folks, this is the outrageous propaganda crafted by a deep state team owned by George Bush Sr., which was used to justify the first invasion of Iraq. That testimony to the world, implicating Iraqi soldiers in throwing Kuwaiti babies onto the floor of a hospital to steal incubators, was orchestrated by people I've now linked directly to the Wuhan Virology Institute. How about that? I'm going to show you the evidence linking the Deep State network to Wuhan, and I'm also going to identify the Deep State operative involved in it. After all, this is the beautiful truth.
You are on the next level. This is the beautiful truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
And you are very welcome. This is the beautiful truth with Fintan Dunne reporting on the 3rd of May. And folks, I'm pretty happy that we've nailed what's going on here and that you're going to be a lot wiser by the time you've watched this. I'm not one of these guys who thinks you spend 2 hours watching me go through news articles just reading them to you. No, I'm just going to plow through this at high speed and just lay it out for you. 3rd of March, 1991.
The opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at
5 months after the Kuwaiti incubator story, George Bush's New World Order was already flying, and he had used the story as part of the justification for the invasion.
Later in the evening, after the afternoon of the hearings, and the president said that he had seen it on CNN, and that he was shocked at some of the things that he had heard.
They had people on
The president repeated the incubator story 6 times in his verbal war against Saddam.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
Yeah, except it was also going to be systematically dismantled by this deep state origin of all of our current troubles with George Bush Sr., the man who killed Kennedy. So who orchestrated this? Who orchestrated this coup for George Bush Sr., which was so vital in the propaganda leading to his seminal invasion of the Middle East? The answer to that, the deep state connections here, are going to lead us directly to the Wuhan Virology Institute. So let's take those steps. Starting here, I'd recommend you try this article, Public Relationships, Hill and Knowlton, Robert Gray and the CIA. And what that's all about is the public relations firm Hill and Knowlton, because that's who had orchestrated the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter to pose as an obscure Kuwaiti refugee and go before the world. Hill and Knowlton Public Relations. And this article here is pointing out that really when you say Hill and Knowlton Public Relations, you might as well just say CIA, because there's such a CIA front. This is from back in 1993, but it hasn't changed since. These are the roots of the New World Order, folks, and Hill and Knowlton had a key role to play in all of that. The article points out that insiders in the Clinton administration, including Ron Brown, who was a lobbyist for Haiti's baby Dr. Valier, Hill and Knowlton acted for baby Dr. Valier, and also others in the administration were linked to Hill and Knowlton. And the article examines Hill and Knowlton. It says, Hill and Knowlton is one of the world's largest and most influential corporations. As such, its virtually unregulated status, its long-standing connections to intelligence agencies, its role in shaping policy, and its close relationship to the Clinton administration deserve careful scrutiny. Yeah. Before we go off the subject, just check this out. 9th of April 2003, Iraq. Just check this out. April 2003, SARS outbreak. 1st of April, the US government called back non-essential personnel from their consulate office in Hong Kong and Guangzhou. Isn't that an interesting concordance between the emergence of the SARS epidemic at the end of the Iraq War II invasion? So that was deliberate, folks. That was the same crew. I'm just mentioning that in passing as we go along. So you can connect all the dots properly, because it was necessary after the invasion, which was all shock and awe, had taken place, to divert your attention away somewhere else and to hit you with some more shock and awe. Part of the softening up process. So just as it happens, we had the SARS outbreak just as it was required for strategic purposes that your attention be diverted away from Iraq now that the invasion had been successfully accomplished, and because there was work to be done, that it was better that you wouldn't be seeing that and you'd be looking elsewhere. And here's some more from a great book. This is Explosive Secrets of Covert CIA Companies by Rodney Stitch, and I just quote from that. The CIA, the firm has numerous CIA and other intelligence agency personnel on its board of directors. Hill and Knowlton, this is. Robert Gray, who created and operated Hill and Knowlton since 1961, had numerous contacts with the CIA and other intelligence groups, and with such CIA personnel as William Casey, Edwin Wilson, Oliver North, Robert Owen. Gray also formed his own company with CIA contacts and was on the board of directors of several covert CIA companies that fronted for Task Force 157 and ONI intelligence operation. And now you know and see how it was that Hill and Knowlton, as a public relations firm, was actually involved in intelligence activities on behalf of the CIA. We're nearly ready to make our jump to Wuhan. One more stop before we go. Now, the guy who's going to take us on this one more step is Pete Buttigieg. And the question that's going to lead us in the right direction is the one, is Pete Buttigieg in the CIA? And this article explores that. And it's from December of last year. What Pete Buttigieg says he did at McKinsey, which is a consulting firm. A private sector consulting firm like Hill and Knowlton is a private sector PR agency. And Pete was just explaining a few things. Last month, Alex writes, the author, Edward Isaac Dover. Last month, a source emailed a colleague of mine with a complicated theory that the source claimed proved Pete Buttigieg had been in the CIA. The American people have the right to know if he was ever an agent or officer, the person wrote, with the kind of baseless confidence that lives on the internet. By then, Buttigieg critics on the left had started to focus more on what the South Bend, Indiana mayor could have been doing at McKinsey. Indeed, what was he doing at McKinsey? Well, he definitely wasn't in the CIA, but as other articles around the time, July of last year, McKinsey and Company is an elitist cult. Why is Buttigieg defending it? McKinsey's got a special relationship with the CIA as well, which should help to enlighten you. Here's an article from July of last year. Spies fear a consulting firm help hobble US intelligence. And they're moaning about the fact that McKinsey was brought in to sort of, jizz things up with the CIA a bit, make the place run a bit better, get rid of some of the inefficiencies that were there. And the story explains how, after messing around with the organizational structure of the CIA, it was a total failure. It'd be better if they hadn't called McKinsey in at all, made a mess of it. But what you should take from that is that the one company that the CIA could trust as a consulting firm to come in and tell it how to reorganize its operations was its own bastard child. That's who. McKinsey. So now I've identified to you two CIA stinking private sector entities. Right? Hill and Knowlton and McKinsey. Now we head to Wuhan, and here's how. And here's the story breaking in the last 48 hours that's going to take us there. Intel boss confirms that US intelligence is investigating whether the coronavirus outbreak was an accident at a Wuhan lab. And that story breaking right now.
Tonight, China lashing out at the accusation that the virus came from a state-run lab in Wuhan. And the director of that lab, where bats were used in virus research, took to state-run TV saying, quote, "There is no way the virus came from us. We have a strict regulatory regime and a code of conduct of research, so we are confident of that." So there's that. So here's the president this weekend on this issue. Watch.
If they were knowingly responsible, certainly. If it was a mistake is a mistake. But if they were knowingly responsible, yeah, then there should be consequences.
Notice that Trump is giving himself an out there, saying, look, if this was an accident, well, it was an accident. In other words, he's not gung-ho to go after China on this. Why is that? Because he knows it's not China who's doing this. That's why. So now we're moving forward another 24 hours to just 24 hours ago. Blood on their hands. Bombshell spy dossier claims China lied to the world about coronavirus and killed thousands with attempted cover-up. A bombshell spy dossier has emerged in the Saturday Telegraph down in Australia. And it says that China did all sorts of terrible things. I mean, it's an absolute attack on China in terms of its irresponsibility in allowing this thing to happen. So this is just out. And so when you go to the Telegraph website, you get this. At least that's what I got the last time I checked. And they're just doing it again. I can't get it. However, I've got it for you. Got it for you on archive.is. Coronavirus NSW dossier lays out case against China bat virus program. China deliberately suppressed or destroyed evidence of the coronavirus outbreak. Yeah, we know all this. This is old news. The 15-page research document lays out the foundation. And who's this research document coming from? It's coming from the Five Eyes. The intelligence services have put out this document, an indictment of China for allowing this accidental release to take place. That's just breaking. And a huge amount of it links to this China's bat woman who hunted down virus. You've probably heard about this lady. And she was engaged in research into coronavirus and had identified various different variants of coronavirus in bat research, which she'd been doing. And she was concerned, this article in Scientific America reports, that, when she heard news of the pandemic, could it possibly be one of her samples that maybe had leaked? And so if that was the case, this would perhaps explain whether either of the two Wuhan health institutes might have been involved. But she says no. They checked against their database of the varieties they had found, and no, it doesn't connect. It wasn't her, she says. Furthermore, back in January, she identified the SARS-CoV-2 virus and sent a report out to research associates based on her own findings. So she moved quickly to help as much as she could, say her defenders, including Peter Daszak, who says on Twitter, "My colleague and friend, insulted, threatened by conspiracy theorists, pressured by her own government, a world-class virologist, first to identify the origin of SARS-CoV-2 and a wonderful, generous person. She should be lauded as a hero and not vilified as a potential accidental source of this outbreak." Can you smell it? It's coming. We're getting close now. Well, you should know, Peter, shouldn't you, about your friend? Because, Peter, according to this article, which I was sent by one of our forum members, Hawkwind, who's second ever forum member on breakfornews.com, so he goes back a long way. Thanks, Hawk. Because I did a little bit of looking into this article. It's from Newsweek. And it seems tangential, but it does point out that Dr. Fauci backed controversial Wuhan lab with millions of US dollars for risky coronavirus research. It's come out in the last few days from Newsweek. And it details how, in fact, the Obama administration had stopped research into this area. So they'd stopped research into this gain-of-function virus research, which could potentially have led to an accidental release. And in fact, that's precisely the kind of research that was going on in Wuhan. And it was restarted by Anthony Fauci in 2017. a year after Trump was elected. Total coincidence, of course, and nothing to do with Trump's re-election. They didn't suddenly feel like they wanted to be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat in a couple of years' time. Not at all. How dare you even think like that? These were just people who were researching, doing surveillance into emerging threats, don't you know? Experiments that would nevertheless enhance the ability of bat coronavirus to infect human cells in laboratory animals using techniques of genetic engineering. In the wake of the pandemic, that's a noteworthy detail. And that's been picked up by other researchers too, that comment by Newsweek. Newsweek are saying, hey guys, it is rather noteworthy, isn't it, that they were doing experiments that would actually enable coronavirus to infect human cells. So, hey, talk about smoke and fire, says Newsweek. Why is Newsweek being that kind to us? I wonder. Why is Newsweek doing that? Newsweek's not really the kind of outfit we'd usually rely upon for frankness, because Newsweek and Time are yet two more CIA rags, which are absolute mouthpieces for the CIA, or for, in subtle variations on that, for deep state networks that are connected to the CIA but sitting behind them and orchestrated by Bush Sr.'s old mob, who are still in power and who are now at war with Trump, and it seems are now at war with the rest of the world. But again, coming back to Newsweek, why would Newsweek be pointing all this out to us? What's going on here? Why are Newsweek so forthright on bringing forward these questions about Fauci and his role in Wuhan? And it does detail, the article, that in 2014, under pressure from Obama, the NIH shut down the work. 21 studies were closed down. 3 years later, however, the NIH ended the moratorium, and the second phase of NIAID project, which included gain-of-function research, began. So after being shied away from gain-of-function research, it's restarted by the National Institutes of Health under Fauci. But of course, there's no US money. Where's the money going to come for all this? There's got to be more than just $3.7 million. You're not going to run a whole virology institute on that kind of money. No, there is more money. Let's just take a look at some of the comments, nevertheless, in this article on Newsweek, just to illuminate you. Wake up. COVID-19 starts in the exact location, Wuhan, where Fauci is promoting research into the coronavirus, which is a good point. You see, there are 10,000 wet markets in China. Gosh, isn't it unlucky that the one wet market where this chose to emerge was in Wuhan, where the Wuhan Virology Institute is. That really doesn't seem likely. Does it seem likely to you? Certainly it didn't seem likely to our bat lady, because she was quite puzzled about that. She thought that the southern Chinese wet markets were really the main risk. In the cooler climates of central China, the wet markets aren't the kind of problem they are in the subtropical heat of the south. So all of that was quite puzzling as to how could a virus ever have gotten out anyway, coming back to the comments on the Newsweek article. Dr. Fauci transferred research in 2015 to the Wuhan lab because in 2014 Obama shut down the research. And we have the fox guarding the henhouse. The next commenter says, I suppose it's a coincidence that Fauci said in a televised interview in 2016, the next president will experience a surprise pandemic. And then he provided the funds which enabled the pandemic we're now suffering through. Is it just me, or is anyone else getting the feeling that we should be taking a really close look at our new American hero, Fauci? Good point. Let's just keep taking close looks at all sorts of things, including that guy, Peter Daszak, who came up there in supporting that unfortunate lady who is under criticism for potentially having exposed us all to this virus. And I'll just quote from the Newsweek article again. When that project, Gain of Function Research, in 2017 was restarted, and they were doing gain of function before that anyway, even though they say they weren't, it was. A second phase, beginning that year, included additional surveillance work, but also gain of function research. The project was run by EcoHealth Alliance, a non-profit research. Oh, my nose is doing it again. a non-profit research group under the direction of President Peter Daszak, an expert on disease ecology. NIH cancelled the project this past Friday, getting quickly out. Daszak did not immediately respond to Newsweek requests for comment. Who's this guy? Who's this EcoHealth Alliance? Here's all my research links. You can have those. They're all in the video description. So let's just find out a little bit about this outfit called EcoHealth Alliance. They seem to be involved in around the world in programs which are looking into virology issues and issues of infection, and they're active in Africa and leading cutting-edge scientific research into the critical connections between human and wildlife health and delicate ecosystems. Oh, this doesn't smell good. This smells like eco-warrior stuff meets CIA. Hold on. That's just our annual report and financials. Right, download our annual report. You know, that's the kind of thing that I like to do when I'm researching into these things. Like, I just go straight for the financial reports. Let's find whose money's behind this, who's on the board, who's involved in this bloody alliance thing. And so that's exactly what I did. So let's just see what they're into here now. Oh dear. A world without pandemics. You're not doing very well then, are you? In terms of achieving it, I mean, like, a world without pandemics. EcoHealth Alliance leads scientific research into the critical connections between human, animal, and environmental health, developing solutions that prevent pandemics and promote conservation. Board of Directors. And senior management team, Peter Daszak. Peter Daszak, he's out there saying all the time that, look, this didn't escape from anything. Peter Daszak. And then a letter from the chair. One Health, the idea of the health of everything sharing the planet is related. And this is the chair, lovely lady here, writing, it's great joy and honour, etc. Our commitment is to a world without pandemics. Ellen Shedlar's chair, EcoHealth Alliance. Ellen Shedlar's. Let's just check that out. Yeah, here we go on LinkedIn. Very good. Ellen Shedlar's Board of Directors, EcoHealth Alliance. About widely respected senior executive, blah, 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 blah. We just go bring that up a little bit more so we can see it better. Very good. Morgan Stanley, blah, blah, blah. Oh. Chief Talent Officer Hilla Knowlton. September 2002, November 2006. Prior to that, Delta Consulting. Prior to that, 21 years with McKinsey. Oh. Then Morgan Stanley, ZBI, Human Resources Consultant, Human Resources, Talent Management, and Chair, Board of Directors, EcoHealth Alliance for the last 7 years. Facebook page. Ellen, you can't send astronauts to the sun because they would burn. Trump, what if I send them at night? Okay, lame joke about Trump. And little post about EcoHealth Alliance. And some pictures of doggies and no personal profile pic. More pics of doggies, more pics of doggies. This is a Human Resources Talent Scout individual. Human Resources Talent Scouts I've seen in the past have vast networks online. I mean, they just live their online networks. Ellen seems more concerned in moaning to Audi about an Audi she picked up in May there last year. A 2019 A4 from Manhattan Audi. And before she was out of the garage, the MMI failed. And they told her, like, yeah, we can do nothing about it. Buyer beware. Sign the papers. Life is tough. But you're running a busy little outfit there, Ellen. All your recent publications from EcoHealth Alliance, statement in support of scientists, strategy to prevent future epidemics, synergistic research. Look, there's even pictures of furry animals. How could we be against this stuff? Identifying the wildlife trade network in Indonesia, molecular characterization of rotavirus from rhesus macaques, population genetics of fruit bat reservoir, and the Nipah virus, transnational development, pangolins, and pandas, a novel hepatozoon in giant pandas. Who knew, eh? Let's just cast our eyes on something here. When Shedlar's left Hill and Knowlton for Morgan Stanley, leaving her position as Chief Talent Officer, this was back in 2006, October 27th. And Paul Taff, the chairman and global CEO of Hill and Knowlton, said she's going to be greatly missed. There you go. Well, she had busy work to do, and now here she is, running an EcoHealth Alliance agency which is deeply involved in research at the Wuhan Institute, with her own personal background in McKinsey and Hill and Knowlton. And if I was Chinese intelligence, I would be kicking myself for having let this outfit in with someone like Ellen Shedlars at the helm as chair of it. But those are the risks you take when you engage in international commerce, and the Chinese have to do business, and the Virology Institute did business. It also did business with Australia, and Australian researchers were over there as well. And they were over in Australia doing this kind of research. So what's going on here? It seems to me that what we have is, politically, we have Trump not wanting to go after China because he knows who's really responsible. It seems to me that operationally, from the point of staging this event, that the fact that Newsweek is so happy to dip Anthony Fauci in the shit over this is because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. See, we're never going to be able to prove who did or didn't release a virus. Never. And so this was the perfect way to set China up, wasn't it? For the EcoHealth Alliance to come in. I'm sure there's plenty of agency personnel swarming all over this research, and have been ever since back in the time of SARS-1. Because its potential then as a mass control device was being developed. The masks, all the responses were initiated and kicked off by that event. And so the Wuhan Virology Institute was a perfect place to set it up, because you're never going to be able to prove one way or the other whether it was an accident on behalf of them or whether it was a deliberate release. And so you have an opportunity to deliberately release, haven't you? With a perfect bloody cover. Furthermore, you've got access from research that was done by the Institute. You've got access to a nasty little pathogen that you might like to release out there. And here's the paper published back in 2015, a new SARS-like virus that can jump directly from bat hosts to humans without mutation. So this is the kind of work they were working on. And if you're all over them, if you're in the agency and you're all over them, or if you're in the deep state network that is connected to this and you're all over what's going on in this area, all you got to do is cherry pick your best candidate out of that research, aerosolize it, and then just go and release it. And you're good to go. Because for political purposes, the Chinese will take the heat. Well, it happened near your lab, it must have been blah, 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 but nobody in the end will take the heat for it. And I think how it will play out, is this: Trump will continue to blame China because he's got to. He's got to deflect some of the political heat away. It's just a smart move. And that will be done ritually, but as you see, without deep conviction. And that will be a wise move from Trump's perspective. The deep state will keep up its propaganda campaign against China because he's their Lee Harvey Oswald, China, the Lee Harvey Oswald of this. And so the deep state will continue to say, oh, it was Lee Harvey Oswald, That's the only evidence we can find, is it was Lee Harvey Z. Oswald. So, and Anthony will continue to, push the old keep the shutdown going. Because there was one tiny little problem they had with this, you see. And that tiny little problem was that you can't have a coronavirus surge in the summer. Because it's not going to happen. The weather's against it. They surge in the winter. And therefore you couldn't organize one in the summer that would then trip Trump up at the November election. So you just had to do the best and go with the one that would sort of peak in March and try and keep it going long enough to do sufficient damage to the economy. And that's why you see the Trumpster there looking sideways at Fauci. Because this is their last-ditch effort. Fauci's thick with the Clintons. I've shown you how the deep state apparatus to which he's connected, and he's invested in this big time, Fauci. He's there at the beginning of the HIV/AIDS thing. He's a key player in this. And you've got to, you've got to admire, to a certain extent, the situation they've managed to leverage themselves into. Because we have now got Trump sharing a White House podium with his deadly enemies. These are Trump's enemies, and they have inserted themselves right into the White House and onto the podium with Trump at the very time that he's moving forward seeking re-election, which was quite a little stunt. But now you've seen how it was done. You've seen how it was done to the assistance of somebody who's got a background in Hill and Knowlton and McKinsey, two absolutely CIA-ridden organizations. And you've seen how her operation was used to insert this entire drama into the White House at a key moment leading up to the November election. Not because they think it necessarily will stop Trump on its own per se, but it might. And also, they need leverage. It's time for another one. First one was back when AIDS was done, then 9/11. Now it's time for another one. This is their hour of need. This is their last desperate gamble. This is, I think, where they go down. But you've got to admire their chutzpah, haven't you? It's easy to do, though, when you're on the inside of these events. You know, when you're on the inside of HIV/AIDS and you know the strings that you're pulling. It's easy. It's so easy. When you're on the inside of 9/11 and the emotional strings you're pulling, it's so easy when you're the one pulling the strings behind the scene. And that's what they've been doing. But, Trump has been the architect in some ways, in many ways, of his current troubles. At the end of the day, Trump is not somebody who's going to really get dug in on our side. Not really. Let me play you a clip by Robert Kennedy in an interview, which he did not too long ago, where he explains what happened to that idea, that he was going to head up a vaccine inquiry, and that Trump had okayed that idea, and that it was a good idea to look into the safety of vaccines. Had we started that process, maybe now, as we're looking down the barrel of a forced vaccination mandate, we'd be pretty sorry that Trump didn't go with that and didn't put Kennedy in charge of a commission to look into these issues. Why not? What happened?
The CDC, you have not done the studies necessary to make these claims that you are making.
In 2017, you met with President Trump and you said he was going to appoint you head of a commission about vaccines. That didn't happen. Why is that?
My assumption is, and my assumption is based on empirical observation, that the industry at that point got to him. And, Pfizer, immediately after that meeting with me, Pfizer made a $1 million contribution to President Trump's inauguration. He then took people who were vaccine lobbyists, appointed them to the highest positions at CDC and HHS, and we were cut off.
And there you go. RFK says Trump took the money and he folded under the pressure coming from the industry. And okay, he can't take on everybody. I'm not saying that Trump is perfect. I'm not saying he's an asshole. He is what he is. But in the light of subsequent developments, maybe if you hadn't done that back then you wouldn't be in the situation you're in now. Maybe if he hadn't done that, he wouldn't be sharing a podium with the goddamn New World Order itself. If you'd said to me, and I'm at this certainly since before 9/11, but at least that long, 20 years. But if you'd said to me that my research and investigation into HIV/AIDS going all the way back to 1984, plus all of my 9/11 issues, would all sort of come together in one giant conspiracy conflagration in a SARS outbreak just before the re-election of Donald Trump, and that would tie everything together into one seamless whole where we can see the psychological operations which have played out over the course of around 36 years. I just wouldn't have believed that we'd ever get a chance to tie them all together so neatly for you. I thought that my research into AIDS and 9/11 was now consigned to really history, and that it didn't have immediacy and currency. But here you now see how these events in recent times with COVID-19 are a psychological operation which had a previous psychological operation and a previous one again, and take us right back to the dawn of this with Tony Fauci. And now we've gone back even further. We've taken a look at how a CIA operative or a Deep State operative led a bio-research group right into the heart of the Chinese establishment and used that as a Trojan horse in order to stage the current incident, all designed to engage in this final showdown in the White House between the New World Order and the current most likely individual to dethrone them. And he still is. Curiouser and curiouser, as Alice said when she went through the looking glass. All right, get the word out, folks. This ain't that difficult. You've seen me connect the dots right there. We now, I think, understand how all this was done, and I still have confidence in the final outcome turning in our favour. That's it for this edition of The Beautiful Truth. I'll be back with more soon. I hope you can join me for that. But in the meantime, for breakfornews.com, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.